I'm Will, and this is The Real Deal. Guys, I know it's been a long time since I posted a video, but I'm finally getting back on track, hopefully, and I'm going to give you my cinematic year in review for 2016. Instead of doing a traditional top 10 or top 20 list, I've decided that I'm going to talk about my favorite films of the year in no particular order, and then tell you what my favorite film of the year was. I'll also talk about the worst films of the year, including what the worst one was. I'll also give out some interesting superlatives, including most overrated and most underrated film of the year. First, let's talk about my favorites. The Witch. This was a return to atmospheric horror, kind of like The Shining, but in the unique setting of Puritan America. When an excommunicated Puritan family's baby is stolen by a witch, suspicions fly about who in the family might or might not have ties to witchcraft. The atmosphere in this film was incredible. I was truly hypnotized by the style that this film possessed. The combination of the cinematography and the score just created such an enveloping atmosphere, and I was truly mesmerized by this film. Plus, it's pretty darn creepy. Now, it's not jump scare scary. It's the kind of scary that gets under your skin and digs around and just sits with you after you've left the film. And I have to give it all the credit in the world for that. Deadpool. I know, it seems a little silly to put a movie like this among the best films of the year. But dadgummit, it's just great. I'm a huge fan of the Deadpool comics. As you can see, I'm wearing a Deadpool shirt right now. And the movie captured the spirit of the comics so well, while also giving it its own unique style. What made it so special was the screenplay, written by Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick, the same guys that wrote Zombieland. And you know that they have a good grasp of how to write a self-parody, which is exactly what Deadpool needs to be, and they did it superbly. Also, Ryan Reynolds was just awesome in that movie. So, definitely go check out Deadpool if you're one of the, 2 people that hasn't seen it already? Hunt for the Wielder People. This is a slightly more obscure film. It was a New Zealand film, and it only got a limited release in the States, but I was fortunate enough to see it. It's really funny, but it's also a good family adventure. It almost feels like an 80s kids movie, where it's definitely got an edge, but it's got a lot of heart to it as well. And the humor in it is very quirky and, well, if you've ever seen any other New Zealand comedies, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Plus, you get grouchy old Sam Neill as the old man, and that's just fun in and of itself. Definitely see Hunt for the Wielder People. Fences. Alright, where do I begin with this one? The performances in this movie are so good! Denzel Washington, Viola Davis. I don't know the names of the other actors in it, but everybody was so good in this movie, and it was written by August Wilson, who wrote the original play. And you can tell it was written by the playwright because it feels like a play transplanted directly onto the screen. And sometimes that feels a little awkward, but for the most part, it makes it feel very intimate. And that is what makes Fences so special, the combination of the intimate setting and the exquisite performances. Denzel Washington also directed the film, and he did a marvelous job. The Nice Guys. Again, another one that you're not expecting to see on a best of the year list, but if you've seen The Nice Guys, you probably know why I put it up here. It's a special kind of movie that we don't really get to see very often anymore. It's a buddy cop comedy that takes place in the 70s, and everything you love about 70s and 80s buddy cop movies is in this. The witty banter, the sleazy underbelly of the city, bunch of really funny twists, slightly larger-than-life villains, and a really good mystery. The mystery in this film is really well thought out. And for that reason, The Nice Guys sets itself as the best comedy of the year, in my opinion. Nocturnal Animals. This is a highly stylized and very brutal film. And when I say brutal, I don't just mean violent. There's quite a bit of violence in it, but it's very brutal emotionally. This is a very harsh film, and I mean that as a compliment, because it's willing to go in directions that will shock you and disgust you, but also really tug at your heartstrings in an odd sort of way. It's also told very uniquely. There's a couple different narratives taking place that it goes back and forth between. And they use that device very well in this movie. Also, you've got Michael Shannon at his best, and I love Michael Shannon. And so it's nice to see him be given a really good meaty role. Green Room. This was a survival horror film that, again, didn't get a huge release, but boy was this a well-done film. It's hard to describe what makes this film so good other than it's just really, really good. But it takes its premise, which is a punk band that gets trapped in a neo-Nazi bar after they witness a murder, and it takes it and just runs with it. And runs with it in exactly the right direction. It's also got the late Anton Yelchin in it, as well as Sir Patrick Stewart, who is one of the greatest actors alive. But everything from the suspense, to the gore, to the acting, to the camera work, it all just works so well, and it's very cohesive. Don't Breathe. This is the best horror film of the year. In fact, it's one of the best horror films of the last several years. This is a movie produced by Sam Raimi, who you already know is one of my all-time favorites, and it's actually directed by Fede Alvarez, who directed the 2013 Evil Dead for Sam Raimi. The premise of this horror movie is very unique, because it's about three petty crooks that decide to rob a blind guy who's actually a veteran, and eventually they come to realize that if anyone there is in danger, it's them, and the hunters become the hunted. But there's a major twist about halfway through the movie that totally caught me off guard. And that was awesome. It's a movie that had me physically tensed up. And for a horror movie to be able to achieve that, as jaded as I am, bravo. Bravo. It actually had a moment or two that legitimately shocked me. And I mean really, managed to just get me. And it deserves so much credit for that. Moonlight. Moonlight is a very heartfelt drama that shows a young black gay man growing up in a rough neighborhood through 3 different stages of his life. Right off the bat, being black, gay, and poor, pretty much everything is stacked against this guy. And you're seeing how that affects his life as a young child, as a teenager, and then as an adult. And this story is beautiful. It is just absolutely beautiful. It is a work of art. And the struggle feels so real. And even if you aren't black, gay, or poor, myself for instance, you still find yourself relating to this guy. And I found myself so invested in his story. And now for my favorite film of the year, Silence. Martin Scorsese has done it again. This movie is a masterpiece of style and substance. The camera work is beautiful, and it's exactly what you'd come to expect from a Scorsese film. But the acting in it, Andrew Garfield, Adam Driver, and Liam Neeson, are all pouring their emotions out, particularly Garfield. And I was just in awe. The emotion in this film is so heavy and so real and so raw and harsh, and many times very bittersweet. And I'm still reeling from having seen this movie. I loved Silence. Alright, well, there's 2 sides to every story, and for every great movie, there's a complete piece of shit. Let's begin with Boo, a Madea Halloween. You know, I like Tyler Perry. I like him as a person, and I know he's got some talent as an actor. And at times I even find myself liking the Madea character. But this character needs better scripts. I think Tyler Perry really just needs a collaborator, because when he's left to just his own devices, he tends to produce some pretty crappy work. And again, I know the guy is talented. I just wish it was more visible. Collateral Beauty. Collateral Beauty is the worst thing to happen to a whole bunch of great actors since drug overdoses. It's a schmaltzy as hell, manipulative, borderline insensitive, and almost mean-spirited film about grief. And the twists just suck. They just suck. One of them made me laugh out loud. I actually laughed out loud when one of the big reveals happened. Poor Will Smith. Poor Helen Mirren. Poor Edward Norton. Poor Michael Pena. Poor Kate Winslet. Poor Keira Knightley. Poor Collateral Beauty. The Other Side of the Door. You know, I don't often talk to the screen. This movie had me saying one of three things many, many times. You're an idiot. Are you kidding me? And what the hell is going on? It's a movie that makes little to no sense. It's not scary at all. And it's just filled with people making stupid, stupid decisions over and over and over. It's just bad. It's just bad. Sometimes you can't really say much about a movie other than that it's just bad. And honestly, that's the case for The Other Side of the Door. Max Steel. Sometimes you just look at a movie and wonder, how is this in theaters? Because Max Steel feels like not just a TV movie, but a terrible TV movie. It feels like a bad pilot for a crappy superhero show. And it's based on an action figure that spawned, I think, 1 or 2 animated series, and I don't know how well it follows those, but it rips off everything from Iron Man to, like, Power Rangers. It's just insufferable. Alice Through the Looking Glass. I know a lot of people liked Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. I did not. But it was better than this movie! Half the time I couldn't tell if the actors just didn't care or really were giving performances that were that bad. And I think they just didn't care. I don't know which would be worse, honestly, but I want to hope that it was just that they didn't care. Because I hope they aren't just that bad. It's every bad, generic time travel movie, and it gives origin stories to characters that are predicated on nonsense. You're not supposed to give a cliched origin story to a character that's not supposed to make sense. Didn't they teach you this? 9 Lives. Whew. Did anyone think this would be good? Did anyone genuinely think this was a good idea? Dad gets turned into a cat and has to prove to his family that he's actually the dad. And he learns a lesson in the end, and oh my god. This type of movie pretty much always sucks. I don't get it! Kevin Spacey was in this. Christopher Walken was in this. Jennifer Garner was in this. Cheryl Hines was in this. Robbie Amell was in this. It was directed by Barry Sonnenfeld. How did this happen? God's Not Dead 2. Yet another doozy. Coming up sometime in the near future, I'm going to launch a series called Real Faith, where I talk about Christian films and explain why they're not just bad films, they're bad Christianity. And this movie will definitely get one eventually. But for now, I'll just say this. Once again, persecution complex. White Christians in America are not being persecuted. Also, they make the ACLU the villain. Barbie Starlight Adventure. Guys, your kids deserve better than this. I almost feel a little bit bad picking on this movie because it's Barbie. How bad could it be? Pretty bad. The animation is just awful. I mean, just garish. And it's also just a hodgepodge of a bunch of different sci-fi ripoffs. This year we had several great animated kids movies. Zootopia, Finding Dory, Moana, Storks. Just show your kids one of those instead. And the worst movie of the year, Amerikkka. This movie had me laughing my butt off. It was so bad. It was this conservative propaganda film all about a ragtag group of freedom fighters fighting against the evil government. And it was just hilariously bad. It actually, at one point, encourages the secession of Texas. That's how bat-turd crazy this movie is. If you get a chance to see Amerikkka, get a bunch of friends together and just have a great time, because it's actually a laugh riot. Now, before I get to most overrated and most underrated, here's a few movies that probably went under your radar that you should definitely check out. Dog Eat Dog, Bloodfather, They're Watching, The Trust, Wiener Dog, The Wailing, Train to Busan, Sing Street, Siren, The Confirmation, Cafe Society, The Neon Demon, Imperium, Baskin, Darling, Carnage Park. First off, let me clarify. When I say underrated or overrated, I'm not talking about whether or not people saw it and talked about it. I'm talking about the critics' consensus on the film. Whether I felt like critics praised it enough or praised it too much. Let's start off with most overrated. Trolls. Holy crap, how did critics like this movie? How did it get an Oscar nomination for Best Original Song? This movie was annoying. It was annoying and overly sentimental, and people can verify this because I saw this movie with some friends. I actually smacked my forehead at one point in the movie because something so cliched happened. Something so stupid. Have you ever wanted to be punched in the face with happiness? Me neither. That's what Trolls feels like. It's beautiful animation, though. And the most underrated film of the year goes to Swiss Army Man. This was a movie I thought was absolute brilliance. It's so weird and so out there and so quirky that I guess I get why some people didn't like it. But to me, it was just so original and unique that I think it really deserves a lot more commendation than it was given. Plus, Paul Dano and Daniel Radcliffe were both fantastic in it. Well, folks, that's my cinematic year-in review for 2016. Hopefully I'll start getting more episodes up soon enough, but until then, I've been Will, and this has been The Real Deal.